Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Seven Figure Music School podcast. Nate and I met this morning to record some episodes. Nate asked a very innocuous question. Hey, Daniel, how's your week been? This is usually how our conversations start. And it led into us just talking about life. And after that, we decided to scrap the episode plan that we had made to talk about two very polar opposite ideas and places that Nate and I have been living from in the last 3 months to a year and finding ourselves at very different points in our life. And so in this episode today, I think this is going to be classified more as a fireside chat. Like if we were to go out after a long day of working, or perhaps this fall you join us for the Founders Forum, and we were to go out after a day of working together in person in Brooklyn, and we're to hit one of the local spots and just have a casual, informal conversation, that is what you could classify this conversation we're about to have. You could classify it under that. That we are not here to give you as Nate would say, a punch list of items to do, or we're not going to give you this very definitive advice or definitive, this is the way to solve the problem of workaholism versus burnout. This is more like some reflections from two people who have been thinking about this quite a bit and have seen the effects of both in the clients that we serve. And so I do feel like we have something special to offer here.
Yeah.
Nate, thoughts?
Yeah. No, I just appreciate that our listeners are even willing to contemplate the number of hours they're putting in on their studio or their school and contemplate how they feel in putting in all those hours, because at the end of the day, we need to feel great about what we're building and how we're serving the world. And it is a very real thing amongst entrepreneurs to find yourself overworking or working on the wrong things, or having a sense of burnout or a sense of loneliness that you're the only one working this hard on the business. So yeah, it's a great topic. We got some good ideas to share. Some of them are going to be very personal. Some of them are going to be referencing some amazing school owners that we work with and clients that we've had.
So let me set this up with a few thoughts or a few ideas or even stories. First, I have received a number of emails lately from clients, either who are in the forum, private coaching clients of mine, people who are in one of our programs, like our group lesson program, our marketing program. And I've heard the words stress, burnout, even the word depressed quite a bit over the last 3 to 6 months in recent memory. And that has been true over the course of time that I've been doing this, going on 10 years now. I started this in February of 2016. Officially announced. I had been working with owners even before February of 2016. Nobody is reaching out for help because everything's perfect. So there is a little bit of a sample bias there, and that the people who are reaching out to me were looking actively for solutions. And boy, did I give it to them. And you have as well, Nate. And so there is that thought that I have. And then I've worked with studio owners or school owners over the years that have just been worn down. Maybe they weren't using words like stress and burnout, but I have seen the effects of long periods of time, just the day in, day out, daily grind of working. Okay, there's that.
Yeah.
I also want to throw in the idea that it could be useful to go back and listen to episode 16 of this podcast, released in March of 2022. Where it was actually our very first episode about financial fluency. And we just finished up a couple episodes of financial fluency here in the recent past.
Yes, really good ones.
Yeah. And in that, we connected the idea of burnout to the idea of getting clarity in your numbers. The cliff notes of that episode were that burnout often comes because you're either in reaction mode, you're firefighting, you're living in the fog, so to speak. There's these scary monsters lurking, because you don't actually know what's going on in your financial metrics. or you haven't defined what you're going to do. We're actually touching that a little bit later in the episode. But to kind of wrap up my I guess opening here and ask you a question, Nate, you actually said something in that episode, and I'm going to actually read a quote word for word of something you said in that episode.
Go.
We've never met a studio owner who's come to us and said, I want to work more hours and run around like crazy. Nice. Everyone says, I want to find more peace in the day-to-day operations of my company, and I want to trust the future. Now, that's a very Nate-sounding quote. I didn't even have to look to see who said that.
I'm pretty certain those are my words.
Yeah. And so what I want to do in this episode is look at these two polar opposites. Workaholism, which Nate, you said when we were having this chat before the episode began, you kind of said, I feel this creeping back in. I feel this old familiar ghost lurking in the shadows. And then to what I've experienced more on the burnout side and how I've kind of dealt with that and worked through it. And so let's have this hot and cold discussion. The hot, the workaholism, the cold, the burnout. Let's see where we go with this. So Nate, the question I want to ask you on the front end was a question that you had posed to yourself, and you told me you'd pose these questions. Am I working too much? Am I not working enough? How do I know? What do you think?
Yeah. I'm going to go straight to something that we talked about in that previous episode, but I want to clarify a few parts of it, which is that you and I have talked at length, Daniel, about this idea of, annual planning, aligning your business with some sort of personal vision, making sure that that you're not working for the business, but that the business is working for you, right? And so oftentimes as entrepreneurs, we skip the essential step of just saying, do I actually know myself? Do I know where I'm happy, where I'm unhappy? Are there relationships that are still bringing me down? Are there am I feeling obligated in achievement to do things that I'm not really that inspired to do, but I've always been told one is supposed to do this? I mean, we hear about it all the time. Like there's no shortage of stories about people that have, all the wealth in the world and are miserable. Or we have people that find themselves 10 years down the line working, some gig or some corporate job, and because they always thought that was the path you were supposed to take. And then we'll actually meet school owners who are doing a pivot midlife, new career. They're like, actually, I just want to teach music. I literally just met someone like that earlier this week. And so are we working too much? Are we working too not enough? You really can't actually answer that question before you say, am I working on the right things? And so the clarity to me is sort of around this idea of, does Nate ideally know where Nate wants to be 3 to 5 years from now? And how much of that vision for myself is defined by what others are suggesting I should do? Or you always hear this quote, Daniel, I'm sure you felt this in your career, but if you don't choose what to do with your time, someone else always will, right? And as school owners, of course, we feel this every day in our school, because if we don't have a real clarity on our day and how we're going to spend it, someone is always going to Slack you or email, or a parent is always going to write you that's going to end up sucking up your entire day, right? A teacher is going to come to you and be like, I'm really struggling with these 2 students. And next thing you know, your entire day is dedicated to how to handle difficult students that can't sit still or something, during a group class or whatever. So are we working too much? Are we working not enough?
There's so much to unpack there. And I can't remember who this quote is from, but everybody knows I love a good quote. The only way to predict the future is to invent it. And the other thing that I think of too, in hearing everything you just said there, was the massive influence that my coach Dave had on me, and how he brought my focus and attention to a few simple concepts that we all, quote unquote, know, but I didn't realize just how seriously I should take them. And one of those concepts was this idea of radical ownership and radical responsibility for the future you create.
Mm.
And that the word create, even for him, had deep meaning. This whole branch of coaches that I worked with, which I'm working with one of these coaches again this year. I'm actually about a month going to Maui for a retreat with these coaches, and just taking time out from my career, from the work, to
I love
really
that.
reflect as I'm midlife now. The idea of creation, the idea of owning every aspect of your life, the idea of not allowing external circumstances to make you a quote unquote victim. This was what this group of coaches, this whole branch of coaching, this whole philosophy behind coaching really emphasized. And so when I hear you saying, like, make a personal vision, these are the thoughts that are coming to my head. And I would just challenge everyone listening to this that the idea of sitting down and planning out your year, your month, your week, your day, your next hour isn't a silly idea. It's not
Right.
overkill. It's not. Um, I've heard some people say, like, well, man, if I planned as much as you, Daniel, I'd never get anything done. And it's like, well, actually, you get really good at becoming efficient at it, because when you take responsibility and you know exactly what you want, you would actually be shocked at how efficiently you can do those things. It's actually very simple when you are holding yourself accountable for all the choices you make.
Well, and Daniel,
Yeah.
you're making it. If I did so much planning, I would never have time to get any work done. I would say if I did so much planning, and yes, there is a version of too much planning where you're always questioning your plan. You do.
Yes.
There's a reason why they say create a plan, work the plan, because you want to learn through the experience of the choices you made. However, create a plan, work the plan, and you're working on the things that matter.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We talked about this in that previous episode, but I'm just going to say it again, that if we are finding ourselves feeling like we're constantly working, as defined by it's 10:30 at night and you're opening up your email and hammering out emails because it's the first time you've had a chance to really look at it, um, or you're always late on, it's getting your taxes done because it's the last thing, you never make time for that, or you haven't seen your dentist in years because all you're doing is working. And so, you know what I mean? Like, none of us, we're all the same here. All our listeners, you, me, Daniel, we know what the red flags are when we get off track. But basically, if we're reactive in our work, it means we don't actually have a plan that we're trying to work. We're not working a plan. We're working on fires. We're just constantly putting out fires.
Now, I will say that the common refrain that I've heard from people is, well, I don't know what to work on. Oh, well, how would I know that this is the right thing to work on? And honestly, I think that's beyond the scope of this episode.
Right. No, we're not going there. But
Yeah, but I do think I want to acknowledge that someone, or many people listening right now or watching on YouTube, could be that could be the exact excuse that you run to for not doing what we're suggesting here, which is having a very detailed, integrated plan for both your personal life and business and how those two things overlap. And if you struggle with that, you probably need to work with a coach. You probably need to join the accelerator, which reach out to me if you want to know what that is, to actually define what that is and learn how to think and live in this way. Because I could not go back to living haphazardly or reactively. My life is too good. And to the degree that I got more serious about planning, thinking about the future, having a defined operational, having a defined plan for my day, week, month, year, I just saw my income go up and up and up and up and up because I just got so much done in a shorter period of time.
This episode is sponsored by BigMusicGames.com. As our listeners know, Brooklyn Music Factory is all about a fun, fluency-first approach to music lessons. And at the foundation of our teaching methods are rhythm, melody, harmony, and songwriting games that challenge students as young as 4 years old to train their ears and flex that musical mind. Because when you set an intention of gamifying every single lesson, you're going to find improved attendance, increased play at home, and higher student retention. So we've set up a website just for our listeners so you can start playing today. Go to bigmusicgames.com/7FMS and create your free account. Again, that's bigmusicgames.com/7FMS. And if you join today, I'm going to send you a personal invite to join our weekly teacher training call with me and Greggy Bizzle, our chief game designer. Go ahead and put play back into practice with Big Music Games.
That does get us to, I think, what I promised at the beginning of the episode, which was kind of this comparison between the workaholic side to the burnout side, because people can find themselves in those two places. Oh, I'm working too much. I'm just working all the time, and it's almost an addiction. And some in the audience will resonate with that. And then there's the I'm working all the time, and I'm so burned out. I don't want to be working this much, or I don't enjoy what I'm doing. So let's explore those two sides. And Nate, for the workaholism side, what you've been reflecting on recently, I'd love to hear from you. How do you even define workaholism, and where have you seen it in your life?
So when I was working with a coach, we worked with a program that sort of helped identify one of my key characteristics, which was hyperachiever. And a hyperachiever isn't by definition a bad thing, but it does mean that anytime I choose to do something, I'm going to go hard and I'm going to kind of go big, right? So, it's like when we were designing the Founders Forum, it's like, I don't want to just do a call a month with these people. Like, we want to host them in Brooklyn. I've always wanted to do multi-day retreats, so we had a great one in January. We have another one coming up in a couple weeks, right? So the hyperachiever in me is doubling and tripling down on developing an imagination and trying to go big. But as a result, if I'm thinking large, then I will oftentimes go hard to try to do anything I can to achieve that thing, right? Sometimes if you're listening and you're really competitive, right? If that's part of your nature, you're very competitive, you can see that same quality come up. Right? You're going to train harder than anybody else because you really want to, you need to finish in the top, right, of whatever it is you're training for. It's not good enough for you to just be in the middle, right? So the hyperachiever was something that we worked on a lot and tried to reframe it, right? Being like, well, what are all the positive qualities of hyperachiever? Well, positive qualities of hyperachiever is that I see this as an opportunity to benefit people in a much deeper way. Right. I'm not interested in shallow, sort of, as we've talked about before, digging lots of shallow holes. It's like I want to go deep on something. I want to make sure that people truly benefit. And so we kind of went through this hyperachiever idea. However, let me flip that sucker, Daniel, and bring it back to workaholism. So with hyperachiever, the challenge is that you can really it can affect your kind of self-worth or your reflection on yourself. Whereas, in other words, we begin to believe that we are valuable only if these large things all come to fruition, right? In other words, we don't have an inherent value just as we are without the big dream coming to fruition, right? So that can be where the workaholism starts creeping in, because we begin to think, well, in order for me personally, I went through many years of this where I was like, oh, as a jazz pianist, I'm only successful if we're playing to 1,000 people in Europe, right? I'm only successful. Like, it's not enough that I find joy just being in this studio playing my Steinway. I needed it to also appear in these other ways. As an entrepreneur, there was a lot of push for me to grow a bigger and bigger school. I wanted to have the most profound school in New York City, which is one of the larger markets in the world, right? There was and I've since really been able to reconcile this to just find a lot of joy in serving and building community. But there was absolutely a chapter where, to me, it was all about mastering the craft of business, being bigger than my neighbor, all of these things, which sort of sound a little bit like competition too, because there is a little bit of that. And so the workaholism piece became very clear to me, which was, I was wondering why, like, my business partner, who she's very competitive. Like, there's a reason why Brooklyn Music Factory has one of the largest songwriting camps in the country. Like, she directs it, and she's like, this thing is going to be the best. However, she's never working at 9 at night. She came to me a few years into our partnership, and she's like, Nate, we need to make an agreement that we won't talk to each other over the weekend. And I was like, what? I can't just ping you with my idea at 10 p.m. on a Saturday. You know what I mean? Daniel, because you and I work together and partner, and sometimes, like, I get a great idea and I want to write you. And I literally have had to discipline myself as I'm addressing this part of me over the last 5 years to be like, it can wait. And one of the great things my coach always said to me is, she would say to me, Nate, don't worry. That work will be waiting for you tomorrow morning. It'll just still be there. Rest assured, even when you go on your month-long sabbatical and you come back, don't worry, it'll still be waiting for you. You can pick it up right where you left it off. So the workaholism piece really is around that addiction. It's around thinking that I have a choice and freedom to choose, say, when I write that email or reply to that Slack or Daniel send you an idea. But then I actually just send the email against my better judgment or send you the idea against my better judgment anyways, which means that actually it can verge on addiction, where I've lost the freedom in that moment. The freedom to choose is the most fundamental human characteristic. So anyways, that's my take on workaholism. Of course, it's a work in progress, always with anything we're developing in ourselves. But I do feel quite, I feel in a very different place than I felt, say, 5 years ago, 7 years ago. Yeah.
You're touching on issues of self-control, self-worth, boundaries, both for yourself and with others. And I think what you've said is sufficient. I don't need to comment on this. I do want to play devil's advocate a little bit.
Yeah, please.
Because of things that I'm hearing you say that I'm reacting to internally.
Right. You're like, well, wait a minute. I just sent you a note at 11:30 in the morning on Saturday.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, dig it. What do you got?
So, well, but not just maybe pushback is too strong a word, but even some definition. Before I even get into the pushback, let me ask a follow-up question to everything you just said there, which was, do you see, you've kind of defined what workaholism looked like in your life, and even how to define it. What negatives did you see in your life as a result of this workaholism? I'm just curious.
Yeah, total. That's a great question. The first and most obvious negative was from my life partner. It was from my spouse. Jess would just say to me, she'd be like, can we not talk about work right now?
That's tough when you work with your spouse.
Yeah, and we work together, but I wouldn't even be working. Yeah, boundaries, totally. And she would, I vividly remember, dude, a conversation. We were at our favorite, I don't think I've taken you here yet, but I will next time you're in Brooklyn. But this great Korean barbecue place. And we oftentimes will go post up at the bar there and get like fried chicken and these.
Is it at the Ace?
No, not at the Ace. No, this
Okay.
place is called INSA. And
Okay.
they're one of the reasons why I feel really comfortable plugging them on the pod is that they were a Brooklyn Music Factory family for a long time.
Nice. That's
So
cool.
we always love to serve the community of the community, etc. Anyways, we're posted up at the bar, and I was sort of having this, when there isn't a real clear plan, that's when I don't feel very confident about sort of my 3-year vision for myself and the life plan and for us, my family, and all of these things that fall into a plan. What happens to me is that it becomes sort of this existential. It's like, remember how I just said 15 minutes ago, if you don't really have a plan or you're constantly changing your plan or questioning your plan, right? So for me, it would turn into this existential crisis. It'd be like every 3 months, I'd be like, maybe my plan was wrong. It's all wrong. And that was always a reflection of the kind of workaholism. I'd be working so hard and that I would sort of find myself tired. And then I would be sitting posted up at the bar on a Friday night. We've like left the factory. We'll walk down here and I'm talking to her. And she just sort of like says, Nate, I can't have another one of these conversations. And I was like, wait, what conversation? So the just without going into any details there, the negative number one is that it impacts relationships.
Mm.
And it can impact, in this case, one of the most important relationships I have, Another negative is that, I am very much like, I quadruple down on presence and mindfulness, and so my meditation practice. You and I have talked about this. That kind of thing is really important to me, and so these like what I find another negative consequence, and this may sound a little too like abstract for our listeners, but it's a very real thing, and I think everybody knows this. But what happens is your mind starts almost racing. It's like you have too many thoughts that you can't actually organize them well enough. And for some of our listeners, it's just like, well, that's just my ADHD. I know that. But actually, we can exacerbate it, right? We can actually be throwing fuel on that fire. And so that was another negative for me is that instead of feeling very quiet and peaceful, you're sitting at family dinner and you're listening to your kids, I would be like having thoughts about work. I'd be having thoughts about a possible strategic choice I could make instead of being present with my daughter, who's like, I'm only seeing for an hour a day, anyways, So, like, that is relational, right? It affects my relationship with my kids because I'm not present for them at dinner, but it's very much also it is what do you call it when it just continues to build on itself and it snowballs. That sort of like chaos in your mind. And I'm sure our listeners know because it's a classic entrepreneurial issue is that chaos of like having more and more thoughts and not being able to catalog them or put them
Yeah.
to bed. So
Yeah.
those are a couple negatives.
This is so fascinating because we both went into this episode knowing that we didn't have the most defined outline.
No, it's a fireside chat.
Yeah. Unlike other episodes where we're really clear on
Yeah.
what we want to talk about, but you could not have teed up the switch into burnout better. Because here's the thoughts I'm having and why I even asked that question is because the flip side of this coin is, I think, representative in some of the anxieties I experienced in my early 30s, late 20s, which I was concerned about having, quote, too much what I'll call junk time.
Right.
At the time, my wife had a corporate job and she was gone during the day, and I didn't teach until 3:30. So we would get up together in the morning. We'd spend time before she left for work. And then I had 6 to 8 hours before I had anything to do.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful with some of the ways I spent that time. I spent a lot of time learning how to market better. I spent time learning how to build an online business. That paid off, trust me. But I
Right.
also spent a fair amount of time playing the game Civilization 4. I spent a
Right.
lot of time just watching shows by myself during the daytime. I spent time playing stupid little games on my iPhone like Bejeweled or Candy Crush, stuff like this. This is pre-child, I mean,
Yeah.
after child, all bets are off.
Right.
But even then, um, Jessica and I approached raising Calvin the same way that we both approached business, which was highly regimented and planned. And we had that baby sleeping within 8 weeks. And,
Right. Right.
we traveled well with him and traveled often with him, and it was not a problem. And it got to the point where even when he was a toddler, he knew to not just come barging into my room while I was on calls for Grow Your Music Studio. He would entertain himself for hours and not need me. And so even kind of setting him up that way contributed to a peaceful life for me. And so I would feel guilty spending too much time in free time or doing, quote, fun things.
Mm.
Um, and so I did feel like I was balanced. But even so, I felt the balance between my work and my play was good.
Right.
But even then, when I was, quote, playing, I felt a little bit of guilt because I knew with as much I could be making another blog post, which was at the time kind of our strategy. We didn't have a podcast at
Yeah.
the time. I could be making another blog post. I could be getting more students for my studio. I could be doing this, like all these thoughts kind of going through my head. So it was, for me, it was not driven by self-worth. For me, it was driven by a sense of obligation to the opportunities I had created for myself. And the better I got at business, the more opportunities that came up.
Well,
Opportunity
yeah.
everywhere. And so,
Yeah.
I should take that. I should take that. And when you grow up in a lower middle class family, kind of blue collar family, and
Yeah.
money is tight, boy, does that feel you just take every opportunity. It's almost like someone who's been without food for days. They finally get food. They're just scarfing it down because of a fear of lack of abundance. And it's just like, oh man, these opportunities could go away. I got to take every single one.
That is so. That is, you're touching on an essential quality around getting clarity, which is that as your music school, as you begin to systemize, as you begin to get more financially fluent, as you begin to wrap your arms around the school, Daniel, we've seen this. You're going to have more opportunities. You're going to see more opportunity. You literally will see opportunities where you didn't see before. You'll be like, oh, I've been good at group piano. I should add group guitar. I should add, like, you start seeing all these things that you, I'm just trying to remember who shared this, but, and maybe you'll recall, but someone said, the problem with opportunities is that they're everywhere. But the right opportunity is what you're looking for. And the right opportunity goes back to knowing what you intend, how you intend to serve the world, and what you intend to get out of life.
Mm.
Right? The guilt is, I'm so glad you brought that up, because um, I had a different background than you, right?
Mm.
So in my family, like on my dad's side, they were entrepreneurs. They ended up building an incredibly successful family business, and for much of my life, I grew up in the shadow of that, and so I felt like that anything less than that
Mm.
was falling short, for example, of the family name. And
Mm.
so there was a massive amount of guilt. Now, on the other side of it, Daniel, was my mom, who was an artist her whole life. And so as a creative, as a musician, as a pianist, I felt like if I wasn't fully engaged as a creative, I also felt guilt there. So then, as we've talked about in previous episodes, we end up creating these identity crises for ourselves, right? Which lead directly into, well, maybe if I just work more, That will relieve the identity crisis. But that is not at all a solution, right? You actually have to get clarity on these founding obstacles, these sort of these things that have been kind of baked into our psyche from a very young age. Daniel, the crazy thing with you is that like you're like an efficiency guru, you know? So if you only had 4 hours a day, you'd have a productive, successful business, right? We, you know, so like this notion that you're constantly having to be more efficient with your time, or like from my outside perspective, is absurd to even conceive of in your world, right?
It did lead me to biting off more than I could chew when I was
Right.
younger, because that guilt combined with the scarcity mindset that I had not yet
Yeah.
shed, combined with the fact that I was so efficient, meant that I could do a lot. And honestly, working with Dave really solved a lot of those problems. And I say this unashamedly, but Nate, the reason you and I know each other is because you listened to an episode of a podcast I was on, the Teacher Zone podcast at the end of 2019. And I was talking about how there is no such thing as a business problem in and of itself. It's always a people problem. We do not have business problems. We have us problems that show up in the business. And that the way that I do coaching is to integrate the two layers, the information layer, the strategic layer, and then the deeper layer, the us part of it, that's the X factor in the equation. And so much of the coaching that I do with owners is around that deeper layer, which a lot of other coaches just don't even know how to deal with. Just to be really, really honest, because I've worked with a lot of coaches, and the ones that have always had the most impact on me are the ones that see below the action or the struggle to why I'm actually struggling. And it almost always has something to do with something that's going on inside of me.
Right. Okay. It's like the templates are not going to solve it.
No, they're not. Nothing against the templates.
No, you need the templates too.
Yeah, you do.
You need
Join
both.
the Founders Forum. Anyway, the point is, the point is this, that, well, actually, I don't know. We got a little excited there. Maybe I made the point already, but to go back to what I was saying earlier, this is kind of leading over into the burnout side. And I'm going to get a little bit. I mean, you've been personal here, Nate. You've opened up. I'm going to open up a little bit. I'm going to kind of share some things, because what I'm going to talk about this in two phases. I was primarily motivated by fear in doing my work. Fear of missing out, fear of lost opportunity, fear of not having enough, fear of losing what I own. Ridiculous. But there it is. And I've been open in the accelerator about this, in my coaching about this. I've even done sessions or videos on YouTube, primarily with Alyssa, around more of this this side of things. And I might put in the show notes maybe a really good one to listen to that goes into this. But working with Dave for the first 2 years that I worked with him kind of solved those scarcity mindset issues, all the money fears that I had, the poor motivation. And at the end of 2017, I found myself in a very calm and peaceful place. And in 2018, I made more money than I ever made in my life, because I had a very successful studio, and then Grow Your Music Studio was just blowing up, taking off. I was making products. People were buying them left and right. And it was weird because there was no struggle. I'd solved these issues, and the way that both Dave and Steve Chandler, because I talked to Steve Chandler about this, was that I needed to find a new place to live from.
And that clarity piece.
Yes. Well, that
not
is
really
true.
Planning, but a space to plan from, maybe.
Yes, because if I no longer was being motivated by fear, what was I being motivated by? And that is where the ideas of creation and just the joy of creation, the joy of community, the joy of helping, really, it was there already, but it came to the forefront, and I learned to live in a new way, a very joyful way of living, a very less reactive to my basest desires or fears. Okay. And as I approached the end of the 2010s and got into the 2020s, I was looking forward to another 30, 40, 50 years of life of like living in this way and growing business in this way and being excited about the opportunities presented. And I'm not going to get too overly personal here because of all the people involved. But part of the reason why I had the capacity to do all the things I was doing on the business side of things was because on the personal side of things, home life, family, all this sort of thing was just so completely peaceful and joyful and everything that that almost all of my emotional energy could be put into the business. Or to say it a different way, to look at it from the flip side of the coin, is that because there was really no stress on the home front, the personal front, my health was good, constantly working out, great family life, all this sort of thing, traveling often, having joyful experiences. As you know, I won't be too discreet about this, but money was coming in. From 2015 to 2019, before COVID, my family, we were road warriors. We were constantly going on vacations. I was working from a laptop from all over the United States. We were taking trips. Money really wasn't an object after a certain point for us. COVID hits. And again, trying to be as respectful as possible for other people involved. But I will just say this, that my wife's father had massive health problems, and the weight of that was increasingly on us as a family, and her in particular. That combined with some other circumstances kind of created a massive crisis in our family, to the point that our living situation became unlivable. There were questions of safety for our son. And it eventually led to, a divorce, which I have not been all that public about. Clients know about this, like that sort of thing. It was not something that I ever imagined would happen. Everyone in our personal lives would have said, this is the strongest marriage we've ever seen. But a combination of health issues, mental health issues, massive stress, a lot of outside factors just led to this implosion, And that, all of a sudden, this area of my life that had been very placid for 10, 15 years, had been peaceful, had been a source of strength even, now was taking up all my emotional energy. And in hindsight, looking back at that, the effect of it, which I did not realize, was that it took away my ability to be aggressive and risky. I did not see this. It actually took going through a healing process on the business side of things. Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah. And so I will just say this, that the Daniel that was concerned about junk time in the 2010s and the 2010, 2015, going into like, I have all this opportunity, I'm living from a new place, a joyful place. All of a sudden now I would wake up in 2023, wake up in 2024 and say, why don't I want to work today? I love working. I love the people I work with. I love the products that we have. Why is the only thing that I want to wake up and do, like just play some dumb games on my iPhone or scroll Twitter for hours? And I felt like a different person.
Yeah.
And what it ended up doing, Mr. Planner here, I had people in my life who were kind of looking after me and looking in on me. And there was help that I sought, both from coaches and other professional sorts of help that one gets when you go through a process like this. And I realized that if I can't control this, if I am burnt out, let's say, if I have all this emotional weight on me, if I'm actually concerned for the safety of family members, and I'm having to spend a lot of time securing the future, of my son, like, then I need to take this into account as I think about my life right now. And if I'm consistently waking up and there is no fire there, the fire that has always been there for me professionally, if it's just gone,
Mm.
then I need to look at what I'm naturally gravitating towards and do more of that. And so when I realized this in the middle of 2023, I did something for the very first time that I'd never done in the whole entire history of Grow Your Music Studio. I had never launched my coaching, my one-on-one coaching program ever. It had always been either by invite only or people just kind of reaching out to me
Yep.
because I've talked about it in content. But I actually did a launch for it in the middle of the year because what I found was that there were only a few things that I was consistently showing up for and throwing myself into 110%. And one of them was working one-on-one with other studio owners. And so I took on more coaching clients than I'd ever taken on before in the middle of
Yeah, I remember
2023.
that.
And it was because it was bringing me so much joy. And oh my gosh, it was just some of the best coaching I was doing too, because I was being put through a very tough situation personally. And so all these things that I'd learned in the 2010s around how to handle stress in the context of business, tools that I'd been given to, emotional tools I've been given to handle
Mm.
stress, to think rightly, to be honest about what was going on inside of me and in the world around me, I was now having to use in an area I never had to use it before. And so it was like I was learning to do it again. It was like I found the joy of using these tools again, but in the personal side. And then I think this was just the universe was bringing me people who were also broken, also
Mm.
burnout,
Mm.
also going through massive personal struggles that were showing up in their business.
Mm.
And I was able to empathize and help them in ways that I don't think I would have even 5 years before. And I have built some lifelong business friendships, I'll call them, as a
Yeah.
result of this. People that are very special to me, and I know I'm special to them, as they went through some tough times personally and in their business. Um, I'm not even going to go too much into that. One that was maybe not as delicate or sensitive, and this is an owner that Nate.
Mm.
She was working 70 hours a week in her studio. And by the time we finished a year together, she was down to, I believe, 35 to 40 hours a week. Her studio was growing. She wasn't experiencing as much personal stress around her staff. She let go of some people that she really needed to let go, that she felt guilty of letting go.
Yep.
Um, uh, I'll tell you after who I'm talking about, although you might know just from the context who it is. She's in the forum right now.
Uh,
Yeah, because she went from coaching with me to joining the forum with us, because now that she kind of had this foundation, she was like ready to like really dive into the business. And man, is she ever. I'll wrap up the story with this. There was one other thing that I found myself consistently motivated to do. That was, and I'm not even kidding here. It was working on Piano Express.
mm.
That was a source of joy just because of the team that we've assembled there
Yeah.
and just the absolute uniqueness of this product. Um, that was also brought joy. But, and this is going back to the purpose of this episode, which was kind of the workaholism versus burnout distinction. So often I hear from school owners, the burnout just has to do, honestly, from because of choices that are being made internally.
Mm.
Things that they're not doing, things that they're not tracking, they're in reaction mode because they're not being proactive about their school. And again, the Founders Forum will help you clear a lot of that up. Getting better at your marketing will help clear that up. Learning how to scale better, hire better, that'll help clear those things up. For me, this burnout came from events entirely outside of my control. And all I could control was my response to those things. And I do think in just being, just having seen both kinds of burnout, having seen both kinds of stress, both personally and in clients over the last couple of years, and just fully being humbled almost to see like, oh, sometimes life deals you a hand you just don't know.
You're not
The only
prepared
way
for it.
out, yeah, the only way out is through. And so I will just
Yeah.
say this, that for me, you know, the outer this was the major part of this was resolved for me about 13 months ago. And that was when, got primary custody of my son, like all these sorts of things. And a lot of stress surrounding the uncertainty of the situation was really resolved.
Mm-hmm.
But then in the fallout of that, or in the aftermath of that, wondering, like just expecting to be back. Oh, the stress is gone.
Yeah.
The situation's resolved. Daniel's going to be back now. And then like, wait, why do I still not, why don't I feel like myself? Why am I not just aggressively launching all the time like I used to? Why am I only consistently showing up to record the podcast or do these coaching calls or to do that sort of thing? Because it's a process sometimes. It's a process sometimes, and you have to work through it. And, kind of what, again, to go full circle and maybe end the episode, you asked me, Daniel, how you feeling this week? And for me, what I've just noticed here, oh my gosh, it's wild. At the end of last year, going into the beginning of this year, I went through 3 annual planning processes. Annual planning for Grow Your Music Studio, annual planning for Piano Express, annual planning for 7-Figure Music School. And my mind was taken off the day-to-day, the reactive, that sort of thing. And I practically relearned what we say all the time. Have a vision for the future.
Right.
I think a massive piece in this revitalization I felt over the last couple months, spoiler alert, because that's what's happened, just came from going through that process and deeply reflecting on what I wanted those businesses to look like. And then there was a 4th planning process, and that was just a personal one, reflecting on the last 5 years as I go into 2020. What year is it? 2025. Right. Reflecting on the last 5 years, reflecting on what I want the future to look like for myself, and how all those integrated together. And I spent huge amounts of time in December, January, just in what I will call exploration time, just sitting here thinking, not doing anything, not sending emails, not planning products, not, responding to team members or having meetings or doing coaching, that sort of thing, but just sitting here and just kind of staring at the ceiling, writing thoughts down, contemplating thoughts, taking walks, and I think that was a huge piece in just feeling like I'm back. And even all the people around me are being like, this feels familiar. Daniel, you're more aggressive. You're arguing a lot more. These sorts of things that kind of defined, it isn't exactly the same as it used to be. It's maybe a wiser, older, more mature version of that. Maybe a little bit more introspective, a little more humble version of the aggression, of the having big plans and creativity and that sort of thing. But I will just personally attest to this, that we say it all the time. It's become a cliche on this podcast. Oh yeah, plan out your day, plan your week, do annual planning, forecast this, forecast that. In some ways, it might have saved my life. It's bringing a lot of joy and purpose back. And the balance between, this new life I have now and or this new version of life that I have now and business, there is this balance again where I am engaging in new hobbies and being more social, I think, than I've ever been in my entire life before. And meanwhile, just really getting after it at work too. So that's there's the balance. And I think we all find that balance ourselves. And I think what we've talked about over the last hour now is how you get there.